Hello and welcome to this session on post-pandemic cities. My name is Jeff Mulgan. I'm a professor at University College London and in a past life was CEO of Nesta. And so I've had some involvement on the boundaries of science, technology, arts, and social change. And in this session, we're going to try and look at what might be some of the ways to turn the problems we have, the crises of our time, into opportunities. We have the very fast crisis of COVID still surging with direct effects on infections and deaths and secondary effects on young people and mental health and so on. And then, of course, we have the slow crisis of climate change demanding a complete transformation of our economy and society. So what is the role of science and the arts in helping us to think our way through these crises? In some ways, the last 18 months has seen an extraordinary sort of global experiment in creativity. The world of science now has well over 200,000 papers published just on COVID, an explosion of creativity, most of it completely open access as never before. The education systems of the world went online with incredible speed, which they had struggled with for decades before. Many communities have jumped into new ways of offering mutual support for food or loneliness or help. And of course, many people have been locked at home. Artists, people have been creating visual artworks, writing books, poetry, video, music, and experimenting with online collaborations out of necessity. So what will come out of all of this? I think it's still a bit unclear. The data seems to show that patents, which is one measure of science, have reduced during the pandemic. We're getting less innovation, perhaps. And of course, cities are the places where people are thrown together physically, and that turns them into crucibles of recombination and creativity. And of course, that has dramatically slowed through the pandemic. So is there a sort of pent-up creative surge about to be unleashed on the world, or are we in fact in a slowdown? This is what we're going to explore. We'll also look a little bit at the boundaries of science, arts, digital and green cities. I've in the past been quite critical of how slow the digital world has been to really play its part in cutting carbon, in climate change, reorganizing our systems of data and knowledge for the scale of the transition ahead. But maybe we have made big progress in the last year, which will help us on our way. We have three fantastic speakers, each of whom will talk for about 8 minutes. Thomas Diaz, a leading figure in the FAB movement, FAB City in Barcelona. We'll hear from Monica Bello, head of arts at CERN, one of the world's truly extraordinary institutions. Both Thomas and Monica are in Barcelona. And then we'll hear from Luca Ballerini from Torino Stratosferica, who, like me, is in Turin at the moment. And then I hope we will have some time for you to comment, to ask questions, to disagree, to suggest before we head off for our lunches or whatever we want to do next. So Thomas, can we turn to you first? And I think you have some slides to share as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff. And if you could put the slides, please, people in control. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be sharing this space with such amazing speakers. I am in Barcelona, but I'm actually visiting. I am recently based in Indonesia, where I started the Meaningful Design Group. And from there, I am a part of the leading team that is pushing forward the FAB City Global Initiative without losing the touch with Fab Lab Barcelona and the programs that we had been developing here in the city and the projects derivated from it. So as has been said, and as many of you know, we're in a moment of change, and what it was used to be more predictable is not predictable anymore. Things, like infrastructure, commerce have been changing dramatically during the last couple of years due to the pandemic. But we're seeing also how culture itself is also transforming in a very fast pace, and it's not as I said before, as predictable, no? And if we look ahead, what is going to happen after the pandemic, which is the bigger wave that we're probably going to see related with climate change, this constant change is going to be something that it would be more permanent. So, on the other hand, the addition of the technological layers with all the convergence of crises are going to add more complexity on how we're going to deal with emerging signals. No, like we call these weak signals. This is a word that we are developing together with José Luis de Vicente in our master program here in Barcelona, in which we're trying to create a map that can help us to navigate into this uncertainty and provide tools not only for students but also for designers to create interventions that can help to transform our reality and to produce better outputs. We are living like one of the most incredible technological moments in the recent history. This week in Barcelona is happening the Mobile World Congress, a big congregation of many companies and technology push kind of agenda. This is derivated from the last, about over more than half a century of development of digital computation and digital communications. And this had allowed, many people to have access to supercomputers in their pockets. This is something that is not a surprise for you, and we are hyper-connected to the global level. But what happens when we can bring this capacity of the digital technologies not only to computation and communications, but also to fabrication? This is something that we see could happen inside fab labs, inside digital fabrication spaces where people can have access to the tool to transform bits into atoms and atoms into bits. This means that the power that you have right now with your phone to take a picture and to share it around the world, you might have it in relationship with the physical world, meaning that you can scan something, send it to the other side of the world, and be produced in one of these distributed infrastructures that are digital fabrication labs, so they can evolve to other type of large-scale infrastructure that cannot be just small maker spaces, but also large-scale flexible factories. Let's imagine that world in which instead of moving atoms globally, we move information and things are made locally. And imagine we wouldn't have the problems that we have with the blockage of the Suez Canal or the possible future disruptions in the supply chains thanks to the impact of climate change, of the social disenfranchisement. So this is I strongly believe that we are in a transition towards a more distributed model of production, right? That we are living, the evolution from the model of the centralized TV broadcasting to the distributed YouTube or creation of content. We can see like how this translates into, we're starting to imagine how this can translate into the design and manufacturing world and see how, from a very siloed linear model of production that produce a lot of waste and outputs, we move to a more circular spiral model in which, again, production and atoms can stay as close as possible to consumption. And then information can flow rapidly between different layers. And then the roles of designer, producers, consumers start to be less defined and it's more entangled. So right now, the current paradigm is based on the production of stocks, and also the accumulation of infrastructures. It's also based on the access to cheap labor, it's access to cheap energy, it's access to cheap raw materials. And that means that we are just basically in a rat race or the giants of technologies in order to conquer these infrastructures, but also conquering the digital world, as we have seen, the example of the Amazons, of the Googles and the Facebooks. And they operate on this very linear centralized model, right? Thinking about how, a distributed network of small labs can push for an alternative to this might seem crazy right now. But when we look at the evolution of maker spaces and fab labs in the last 10 years, we see like how we've gone from just a few dozens to thousands of them all over the world. And right now I am in Fab Lab Barcelona. I can send a design that I made here to Indonesia, and I don't need to transport it or put it in a shipping container. And this is part of this distributed agenda that we're trying to push, in which the designs or the recipes of things are shared globally. Just to use an analogy, We don't ship all the pizzas of the world from Italy to the rest of the places. We share the recipes and the infrastructure is accessible locally. Same way could happen with manufacturing and with design, right? We can share the designs in an open source way and it can be produced locally thanks to reimagining the infrastructure that we need in cities and in neighborhoods in order to do that. So this is something that we have been prototyping in Barcelona for quite some time. The idea of the Fab City prototype in the Poblenou, one of the neighborhoods of the city, is trying to not only think about how, from a very technological perspective, we can provide this access to production, but also by articulating local ecosystems. This is a work that we have been allowed us to connect with local initiatives that are trying to use waste to produce new materials in the neighborhood, to urban orchards, to restaurants that are pushing a very sustainable agenda. And thanks to this effort that we have been making with the Cisco project in the Remix El Barrio, we're very happy to announce that we're one of the winners of the Star Prize in 2021 on the innovative collaboration with the Remix El Barrio, no? Thanks to the work of the amazing team here in the lab, but also the effort that has been done in the neighborhood by the different initiatives connected to us. So this is something that we aim to take it to the city level. We're trying to identify that local ecosystem in the city of Barcelona, but also its bioregion and going beyond the urban limits. Just finally, in the last 30 seconds, the big question here is like, can we think about a productive urbanization that is not using global supplies in order to keep consuming resources? This is something that we're pushing inside the Fab City Global Initiative since 2014. 40 years we had pushed in our agenda to transform the way we produce and consume in our cities and in our bioregions, following a multi-scalar strategy called our Strategic Action Plan. And it's something that we are doing collaboratively globally with 38 cities and regions, also following a very clear organization, a group of amazing people in the Fab City Collective, a network of cities, and also the recently launched of the Fab City Foundation based in Estonia, following the digital program of the country, which allow us to be anywhere in the world. So thank you again for the invitation. I think this is my 8 minutes. If you want to learn more, please go and check out our online live. Thank you. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Thomas. It is always inspiring to hear you speak and fascinating to see this movement's continued growth. Perhaps later in this session, we might come back to how COVID has sort of reinforced the role of neighborhood, the 15-minute city, and what fab and manufacturing and so on what part they may play in that. But let's turn first to Monica from CERN. You are not, in fact, deep underground, even though CERN is, and of course the home of the World Wide Web, which we have become even more dependent on in the last year or so. Monica, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Goff, and the organizers, as well as my colleagues in the panel. I'm going to be more descriptive of what we do, as well as the questions we ask. I've been running art and science programs for my entire career, and I guess this is my opportunity to raise some questions that are quite general, but I like to discuss with you later in the debate. First of all, I'll tell you what we do at CERN. I'm the head and the curator of arts at CERN. It's the official arts program of the laboratory since 2011. We are now in our anniversary year, the 10th year of these activities. We run and we foster interactions and dialogues between artists and scientists within the laboratory culture. I think for us, the focus is to create experiences, multiple experiences, so diversity and different voices are part of our philosophy. And we like to be very close to our community. CERN has a community of over 14,000 scientists, engineers, and IT experts, and we are a global and transnational community. Is in Geneva. We are in Geneva, right in the border with France. And when I say transnational, it's because I want to emphasize not the fact that it's in between borders, but because we are people from all over the world bringing knowledge and expertise. So what we do at CERN is to, from the very beginning, the first few years, we focus on residencies at the lab, intense experiences and exchanges with physicists and engineers, where artists from any discipline could apply for the residencies and develop research and exploration, as well as adopting the language of science and understanding what contemporary science is providing, what is today science, and what questions, what big questions inform physics, and what are the challenges. And through this process of residencies, we support the artists later on. Thanks to, well, not entirely true, I don't think COVID provoked this, but helped a lot to create a new strategy based on the extension of the artistic residencies into artistic commissions and exhibitions. This was adopted in 2018 after some pilot programs that make us realize that there was an interest to continue the research into art production, and the strategy is today the core of our program. We support art production to raise awareness of the type of interactions art and science can have within these very specialized environments, and is having a good response. The institutions, academic environments, and the public is responding to this. We are right now one of the I would say the leaders in and an internationally recognized agency for supporting excellence in art and science productions. So in 2015, I embarked in one of the most inspiring cultural projects in Europe, which is Arts at CERN. I had a personal interest in science. I'm coming from art history, but I realized that there was this vector, this technological and scientific pillar in our society that need to be checked and explored further in culture. And this, well, after 18 years running programs, I realized that today we are in this really high moment, reaching perhaps a plateau where these art and science interactions are giving fruits and also becoming something else more connected with the social responsibility that we have today. So I still ask myself often, why do we want to cross disciplines? And why is this bringing value into our culture? And perhaps to summarize quickly some notions that I selected from my random thoughts. Why do we do this? Why we keep fighting through languages and knowledges? And why do we does an artist decide to spend 3 months at CERN? So I think there is a big question. We are right now in an unprecedented moment when we have so much knowledge. We know so much of our nature and even our universe, our technologies, and which have become our eyes in the last 50 years, I guess, reach as far and as deep into the outer space, beyond the boundaries of our galaxies. And this is quite incredible if you retain this idea. We go as far as even where the light does not reach. And we also, our technologies allow us to go inside matter. The subatomic events that CERN is describing are precise, but highly complex. So a single fragment of a hair can be described at a fundamental level. So this is quite extraordinary. We are kind of we have the habit of, yes, we live with this knowledge, but what do we want to do with this knowledge? I think we seek to understand what it is that we do with all this knowledge, and how we manage between disciplines, between cultures, between communities. So this is a big question for me. And then there is another aspect, which what makes art and science coming together. I think there is a lack of social space in art and science, and we lost social space. We are highly specialized. For some reason that maybe we can explore later, we don't have this space for engagement, which goes at the deeper expert level. So I think by being together, art and science are looking for this social space. And then another thing that brings us together is the ability to imagine. I think the arts is known for imagining new worlds. It's like, this is us. But science has also been compelled to imagine, to design, and to structure new and unknown worlds. Furthermore, highly advanced technologies have allowed us to construct models to obtain precise information of what have been, until recently, blind spots in our understanding, and to form and design new predictions. This defines us as a society. And then finally, art and science are by nature disciplines based on the attention, alertness, and rapid response to phenomena or findings that we were not part of the normal conventional equation. This, of course, includes the ability to surpass the limits at a social and civil level, and responsibility and care is very important in our disciplines. So the care to the object of the investigation comes together with the act of doing art and science. So ultimately, art and science seek social and global justice. I want to maybe provoke debate around this. So as a conclusion, we've known and we have been familiar for years with the fact, the rhetoric of systems, connectivity, and the complex reality where all is inextricably linked. Disciplines we know are in flux, and we like to imagine for moments that one sector can become a part of other sector we can share. And however, this understanding is truer now than ever before, and we need to build models. We need to consider this as the normal, the new normal. And the new normal, as we know it, does not exist yet. We need to build it. There are big challenges. I think the fact that art and science work together based on symbiosis and mutualism are values that we need to explore, we need to exercise. Things that they have in common, such as ambition, inspiring, catalyzing ideas, innovation based on a multiplicity of views, openness to other languages and tropes, and the interest to imagine and build a better future could be pillars to these new models for transdisciplinarity. So I'm going to leave it here because I love to explore this later, these ideas later with you.
Thank you very much, Monica, for taking us to these questions of imagination, wisdom, and as you say, the observation, which often is the spark for both science and art, the seeing of new things in new ways. Luca, over to you for the third presentation before we then open things up.
Thank you. Thank you. And well, the fact that we're now forced to think that cities could change because of what we've lived recently. I mean, the pandemic is, I think that the fact that we always have a relationship with the city that changes in relation to what is occurring, in our sensory datum, what is the felt experience of the city that we live in. Our project, Torino Stratosferica, started in 2014, so more than 7 years ago, specifically to work on the idea of cities as related to language and images. So we believe that we could somehow make a better city, especially through the use of a specific language that could enhance some aspects, and at the same time proposing images that could be responsibly better towards what we can expect from the potential of the city itself. So these two things, the idea of language and how it relates to the city, and the idea of images and how they could empower a sort of physicality of the city, are at the core of what we do and what we've been doing for 7 years. But when the pandemic arrived, we immediately felt the lack of a third, more concrete, of course, lag, let's say, to our process. And in fact, it was action. I mean, doing something concretely, not just on the surfaces of imagination, creating images and communication, creating language and words, but of course also to somehow do some exercise on the city itself. And as a reaction to the first lockdown, in June 2020, we started a project that was trying to put on the ground all the thoughts that we had in the past 7 years, as an example of how we could take to the city. Okay, so if we can see the slides that I'd like to quickly go through it. This is the project I'm talking about. It's a temporary and experimental linear park that's been created and on a strip of land that was basically abandoned, and that many citizens like us had in front of their eyes for a long time, because the tramway was not running anymore. And so there was plenty of space to create what most of you could recognize as a small, as a humble, similar to the High Line in New York. That's what we say. It's a High Line, but with your feet on the ground. And so this 800 meters was already there, and we thought, why don't we use it as an experiment of placemaking? So why don't we try ourselves at these, doing it in the physical environment and doing it with the real people who are actually living the place or could come to visit the place. And first of all, I want to say that what we, the first insight that came out of this work is the concept of caretaking for places. Where we have a lot of discourse about public space, but public space without a personal involvement, I think it's a very fickle concept. It could go away every moment because someone has to take care of the things who are there in public. So the first basic concept here is, taking care of what is already existing in the city through some activities that, of course, again, had to do with the image of the city itself. So while we were doing this regeneration bottom-up process, we were thinking, how can we improve the image of the city itself? So from an abandoned, terminus of a former tram line, we imagine a public space, a public square, where we invited repeatedly people to gather to have talks, to have music and a presentation of books, and of course the fact that we were there every week, to clean the space and to see what could be done of it, to reinvent it every week, gather a lot of attention from the people, from the citizenship, and especially from a group of young enthusiasts that wanted, again, because they were coming out of the pandemic, they wanted to be with other people other people that they didn't know, and they want to do something helpful for the community. So it was an incredible experience of humanity and of meeting one another in a context that was also embedded in the idea of creating some urban novelty. So on the one way, we had an ongoing dialogue with the city council and all the other people who are, of course, running specific places like commercial areas, residents, and so on. But at the same time, we were having a conversation with people who were coming from far away, also from towns that are not Turin. So I would say, it's not just the concept of being related to the 15-minute city. It's either the 1-minute city, that means you're just in front of the transformation that's happening, or you could be drawn to that from a very faraway place, even 45 minutes, even an hour. The appeal that the city has is larger than that. I would say, luckily, it's luckily so. So we went on with crowdfunding. We went on with summer events. Many things that we wanted to do were all for free. We put on some furniture. All the typical things that do to signal that what was an abandoned stripe of land was then turned into a linear garden or a linear park, flower pots, wooden seats, everything that you see. And the more we were, doing this experiment, and the more, it was actually going well, because the citizenship could see that from abandonment there was something was created that was more than just a facelift of a place. It was really about the community. It was really about taking care of the place. It was also about a concrete example of civic engagement. And the beautiful message out of it is that the city itself is alive, and is alive after a pandemic that has, of course, hit hard as anywhere else. So, of course, the summer went on. This was last summer. We had a lot of unmissable presentation of books and many things that you see here in these pictures. And the cultural side of it, with music, of course, live gigs, was a representation of all the things that you could do in a public space that has been reclaimed and given back to the people. Even though it's temporary, we're not there to stay forever. We usually say we're not the national park who has in its mission to run parks. We are Torino Stratospherica, we do something else. But right now we have the task and we want to maintain this space. So as long as the city will allow us to do it, we'll do it. And then we took over also a bridge, so the connection spawned also to another part of the city. So the neighborhoods who are now connected by this park are 4. And this means that, again, more people are benefiting from this bottom-up regeneration process. And we're going on also, as you can see here in this slide, we're again working on the idea of the image that the city itself is projecting from this humble, small piece of land. But it's like, make the people pause, reflect on where they live, why they live there, and what they can do to participate, to be more active in the discourse of urban transformation. So we believe that cities, in a way, are mental weapons. That the first city started as an idea from humankind to react to nature itself. And this very basic idea that dates back to 10,000 years ago is something that we should keep in mind even today, even in what we're doing in our neighborhood, in front of our home, or at a larger scale, of course, when we're planning larger neighborhoods or districts. That means that, we are imposing something which is more than the sum of the single parts. And the message behind it should always be that we have an ideal behind it. And I think that the pandemics is showing us the potential of all this involvement for the city, from the citizenship, from gardening, to book crossings, initiatives to do something for our dogs, all the things that we're doing something with the schools, everything that we've discovered that we could do month after month in this year of engagement in a placemaking activity are showing us that there's always a primary role in how we can, I would say, tackle this challenge that cities has in front of themselves. So, of course, that made also the national and international news. We're very happy for that. We also won a big prize that's specifically targeting the civic engagement, Segnali d'Italia, and again is showing that we are able to give a new message, to give a new image, to rely on the basic perception of living a place, taking care of a place. And if the pandemic has this important message to deliver to most of us, I think that most city could thrive out of this new perception. And I encourage everyone to think about it and to possibly do something for making our city, more pleasant, but also more specifically able to deliver message that we want to encourage. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca, and thank you all. We've overrun a little bit, but we have a few minutes left for comments or questions from the audience. I might put a question to all of you while we see what's coming in, which is really about ethos. So what Luca just showed in some ways is a kind of hacker approach to the city, very different from a sort of grand redevelopment plan. It's people taking things apart, putting them together in new ways from the bottom up. And I wonder in all of your talks whether there's what could be called a dialectical approach to science and technology. And let me just give 30 seconds on this and see how you react. So with any technology, there's a kind of position you can take which is purely enthusiastic, which says if it's been designed, if it's been invented, let's implement it. And there's a sort of strand of art and science which is part of that. There's a mirror view which starts from suspicion, which says for anything, whether it's nuclear power or artificial intelligence or new materials, our role is to stop it, to challenge it, to show all of its, the conspiracies around it. And then there's a third position, which is more dialectical, which tries to go both with the grain of science and technology, but also to challenge it and to pull it apart and put it together in new ways. The green movement globally, in a way, has moved from the second position to the third in the last 20 or 30 years. So it's not just that you stop eating meat, but you also develop meat substitutes. You don't just stop fast fashion, but you also redesign whole production processes. So I'd just be interested to hear any of your thoughts on where the spirit, the ethos should be of how we think about technological change, science, knowledge in the next few years ahead of, as we come out of the pandemic. Thomas, would you like to say something about ethos?
No, absolutely, and I love it, and I think we can relate it with with the fact that the first respondents to the pandemic, when there was the need to produce protective equipment, was the people that in the organizations that had some digital fabrication equipment, right? That what we saw in Barcelona and also in Italian cities, in the US and all around the world was incredible. Is to use the infrastructure that was in place that maybe previously they were printing like Yodas, the head of Yodas. Use it to really save lives in hospitals and provide them PPE, protective equipment. And then, on the other hand, I think there is, I pretty much agree with you with this transition towards a more dialectic approach to the use of technology. And I believe there is that the ecological movements are calling for the reduction of consumption. There is a movement around degrowth, which is, I pretty much agree with, but it is also another way to look at this, not from the point of view of scarcity, but from the point of view of abundance. And what we did here in the neighborhood with the Remix El Barrio is to think about the waste produced in the same neighborhood and use it as a supply material in order to reinsert it into productive chains at the local level. So I expect for things to happen more in this direction and to create this idea of abundance of materials around us. And probably that will need also a cultural shift in the way in which we understand what is a good material, what is a good product, how we receive comfort and convenience, and that can be aligned with our ethos and also with a more sustainable approach to the life in cities.
Thank you, Thomas. And maybe Monica, perhaps picking up on what Thomas said, through the eyes of physicists, the world is full of abundance, huge untapped energy, material sources, and yet in the near term, we are all about trying to reduce, to save, to be less wasteful. How do you reconcile these? And very, very briefly, we just have 2 minutes left.
I think I will choose again the concept of knowledge. Knowledge is an object right now. You can do. You can take it from a design perspective. So what can we do with this? What is the shape? What is the interactions, the connections with other objects? And I think what we come to realize by obtaining such a huge amount of knowledge through our technologies and the international collaborations in science and so on is to the realization that there is so much still to know, and if that is certain, are we right? So it's a bit of a epistemological approach to this. So how do we deal with this? I think this is a huge question in our culture today.
Yeah, and presumably we don't want degrowth of knowledge. We may want degrowth of material use and energy use, but it would be a disaster to have degrowth of knowledge. And finally, just 30 seconds, Luca, on this question of ethos and spirit. What is it that you are trying to incarnate through your projects?
Well, I think that your take on hakerism is right. I mean, we couldn't do what we've done, and most people who are doing stuff in the city are somehow moving between, accepting the rules and somehow not accepting them and changing them. Otherwise, the city, it's always be the same. But we also assume that knowledge is provisional. That's for sure true in science, and we should accept that also in city making and post-pandemic city making. So our knowledge is provisional. What we are able to understand is best understood through our learning by doing. So again, let's start to do stuff concretely with people we know, with other people that we will know by doing this stuff, and see what comes out. The experience will let us know if we are on the right track or not. And the fact that we're always looking for novelty, that's true again in science, and that's true again in the arts. It's again true in urban development. It's very rarely said, but urban novelty and media urbanism, as I call it, is something that people are very attached to, and we should promote it more and more in the future.
Thank you. Well, look, thanks to all three fantastic talks. We could go on for several hours, but we are out of time now. And I think you've given lots of insights of how we build on the fast crisis of COVID, the slow crisis of climate change. There is strong polling evidence from many countries that the public really wants to see this crisis used for transformational change to deal with the fundamental problems of our society. And as each of you has said, that does mean drawing on resources of imagination from science, imagination from the arts, perhaps as never before, imagination for novelty, but also for reuse of land, reuse of buildings, reuse of things, reuse of ideas as well. And of course, we are in an era when the people want to be part of this process. They don't just want to be passive observers. And that's, I guess, what makes the whole STARTS program so exciting. So thank you all. I'm afraid we end this session here, but there's lots more in the rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.